Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hey, John.
And joining us today for the first time, and I should say that this is Old Home Week,
You're
because
not
I
kidding.
believe that our guest, whose first major appearance in commentary we're about to celebrate, the last time that I edited a distinguished senior fellow, Danielle Pletka, was 37 years ago. Just to give you a sense of how young I am. Danny is younger than I, so I am old. She remains young, but we worked together. Yeah, I think the last time was 37 years ago, and we worked at a magazine called Insight, which I helped found, and which I believe was that your first sort of serious job in journalism?
No, that was my first postgraduate school job.
There we go.
In journalism. So it was my first sort of non-menial assistant person. I was
Right.
a local hire for Los Angeles Times before that. But yeah, this was my first big girl job.
Yeah. So, and then you went from there to Capitol Hill, and then from there to the world of the think tank, I believe. Or what did you go in?
Nope, that's it.
That's it. So there we go. So we have journalism, Capitol Hill, and the think tank with a specialization in foreign policy. So this is Danielle Pletka. Danielle Pletka is the author of the lead article in the July-August issue of Commentary, which we are very inordinately proud of. It is called The Anti-Semitism Money and Power Network and How to Smash It. And this is a vital piece because it not only goes into the things that we have been talking about now for 9 months about the rise in anti-Semitism and the activism against Jews and Israel inside the United States since October 7th, but provides practical solutions, legal, political in particular, to answer this onslaught, to diagnose where it comes from, and to fight back against it. And we will get to it in a minute. But before we do that, I think we have to talk about the remarkable news of the day, which we alluded to the other day, which is that Joe Biden is issuing an executive order sweeping new protections for hundreds of thousands of immigrants who have been living in the United States illegally for years but are married to American citizens. He is doing this on the 12th anniversary of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals policy. And this is an absolutely fascinating political development, since we've been hearing now for months that Biden really needs to do something about getting tough at the border if he is to have a prayer of winning the election, given how immigration has turned so decisively against the Democrats and him as a political issue. And last week he announced various policies to tighten things at the border, which may or may not only be cosmetic. But this is in response to that. He has decided to, having done Mr. Suits, theoretical tough guy, this week he is now Mr. Compassionate Guy, and it is a very, very odd political decision, I believe. Danny, what do you make of this? Is it moral and spiritual and heartfelt and meaningful, a way of showing fairness and kindness to these people who, through no fault of their own, have ended up in very complicated politicals? Or is it some naked, raw political play for votes in certain places?
Well, Yes, it's a naked raw play for votes because everything that Biden is going to do between now and November is going to be a naked play for votes. Look, I think it's important people understand we're talking about more than 1 million people here. This is not like a few guys that he's being making nice to. Yeah, look, I think that the biggest challenge here is that these people, while they are the cutoff is they have to have been here for 10 years. They have to be married to an American citizen. Okay, but we're still talking about 1 million people. At this point, the problem is that it is rewarding the fact that they entered the country illegally. And I don't care who you are. If you are rewarding people who commit crimes to enter this country, people get mad at you. And funnily enough, among the people who get maddest at you, if you look at polls, it is Hispanics who came to this country legally, who went through all of the processes, who jumped through all of the flaming hoops to become Americans, like I did, by the way. And then some other guy who just walked over the border and married somebody, they're good.
Okay, so this is a very interesting tell because you're saying it's 1 million people, and of course they are probably not geographically evenly distributed. So, where do we know Biden has a particular political problem? Nevada and Arizona. Nevada and Arizona states with significant illegal populations. Obviously, California is the largest. Texas maybe the second largest. Those two are, one is in the pocket of the Republicans, one is in the pocket of the Democrats. That is not the game. Politically, Seth, it strikes me that if Biden is narrowcasting in this fashion, that is to say, he wants to please a certain number of people the way he wanted to please. When they did the student loan thing, right? That was like 25 million people. That's like a pretty significant welfare play and, giveaway play for a lot of people to see if you could get them to the polls. This is though Dave makes a significant point that 1 million people is a lot of people. In terms of an electorate that could be 155 million strong, it's not a lot of people. And so this looks like a kind of political micro-targeting that you might get in a congressional race or maybe even in a Senate or gubernatorial race where you just try to hand a good to a certain type in order to get them to disproportionately show up at the polls. In this case, not only the spouses themselves, but their maybe family members who also like them. I'm not sure. What do you make of it overall?
I mean, this is like the natural end of what began with the soccer moms, which was this idea that, you had a sort of fuzzy picture of a certain segment of voters in your head, and you could cater to them in a way that would show a larger concern to a larger group outside of that named group. And the problem is that he's going against he's got the winds in his face. Yesterday, Sahil Kapoor of NBC News pointed out that YouGov has a poll up in which a majority of registered voters favor a new national program to deport all undocumented immigrants currently living in the U.S. illegally, 62 to 38%. Now, those numbers, obviously, they shift a lot, and it's a snapshot in time. But 60 to any reading, that's 62% in favor of mass deportations on the day the president announces, this sort of amnesty-like proposal is an indication that, once again, they're not really following. They don't really have their finger on the pulse, because if you think that taking a small group of people, if you think that catering to one group of people, even though small, will fan out like concentric circles and show other people that you care and their family members and other interested parties and all that stuff, what was 62% of the country mean in terms of, the mushroom cloud that expands to, so that, they sort of forget the rules, that that the whole point of micro targeting is that you get more than the specific number you're actually targeting. But they're macro targeting their political opposition here with something like this. And the other thing is that in that poll, a majority of Hispanics favor a national program of mass deportation also. So this is another question where, you are micro-targeting specifically people who are said to care about Hispanics and their family members who might be deported, etc. But I think even that, it cuts against what he thinks he's doing.
Right.
But it's the same thing, isn't it? The same thing as his tilting or pivoting on Israel in order to sort of pick up the Arab votes in Michigan. We're talking about a tiny number in terms of the ocean of American voters who are in the minority in terms of their opinion, when the majority of, or at least a robust plurality, but the majority of American people are on Israel's side on this.
I think it's an even bigger story than that, because if we go back 10 years to the announcement of the DACA program that Obama presented, the country was largely in sympathy with the people trapped in the two illegal categories that Obama was dealing with, which was sort of, children of people of indeterminate illegal status, and then some of these spouses, right? So there's two different categories. And I believe, if I remember correctly, the polling showed large reservoirs of sympathy, and the Republican dislike of open immigration had not yet exploded as it has over the last decade. What people objected to about DACA and others was the unconstitutional. If you weren't having us, there was this objection to Obama making legislative policy through executive fiat, and in fact, he was handed his hat twice by the Supreme Court and various other courts and stuff on these matters, that he could not legalize millions of people through the pen and the phone. Since 2014, 2015, when he announced that policy had this incredible unintended consequence, which was the original kids in cages, which is that it was clear that there was a president of the United States. He was a dove on immigration in a way that even the dovish George W. Bush did not reach. And this new flow of people across the border started to overwhelm the Rio Grande Valley and other places. And Trump, of course, tried to sort of block it. There was a huge ideological battle over this. The Biden-Obama policies have led to this 62% wanting mass deportation. Americans did not want mass deportation in 2014. Americans said for many decades that immigrants were a net, including illegal immigrants, were a net positive to the United States in terms of doing jobs Americans wouldn't do and stuff like that. That opinion is no longer the operative opinion of the American people. And you're in a close race, and that's the weird part, is if it's a 62% polling number that says 14 million people should be deported, saying, well, we're going to let 1 million in. It's one of those I'm taking crazy pills moments. Like, everybody's been watching this. I am as dovish on immigration as you can get, period. I have always been. I feel as a Jew that it is almost my moral obligation to be dovish on immigration, since I remain horrified and scandalized and heartbroken at what happened after 1924 and the fact that the gates were closed to Jewish immigration and millions of people who would otherwise be alive would have been alive died. And so I'm very discomfited by this, but I can't deny the evidence of my own eyes that 5,000 people are crossing the border a day and then being sort of slipped into America without being monitored or tracked. I mean, how can you?
There's also, by the way, the passion aspect of this is just another small point, which is that sometimes it's not even just the numbers, but it's who's more likely to be motivated. So, right, that 62%, it tells you where the momentum is. And it should suggest to you, not just in the raw numbers, but that the momentum is the people who are more likely to feel passionate enough about the immigration issue for it to factor into their voting are more likely to be against the type of plan that Biden just announced. And the people who are likely to support it not only are far fewer, but they're probably less passionate about it. It's probably less a tool to clinch their votes than it might be to clinch votes against them.
So there are a few important points, I think, even sort of extraneous to what we're talking about right now. Number one of the big accusations against Joe Biden was that he was incentivizing illegal immigration. Now, if you want to talk about something that incentivizes illegal immigration, paroling in 1 million people and saying all you need to do is marry an American citizen. Yes, of course, it needs to be over a period of time, but that is a huge incentive to illegal immigration. And so he's going to get the crap kicked out of him for that. The other element of this that I think people don't talk about a lot, but that everybody who lives in a state with a high percentage of illegal immigrants, for example, gentlemen, New York and New Jersey, right? Number 6 and number 7 for the largest number in the country of illegal aliens. Do you realize, did you guys see this stat? 20% of New York hotel rooms are taken up by housing illegal aliens. So what does that mean? It drives up the price of the remainder. It drives up the price of basic goods that are being provided by the state of New York and the city of New York to illegals who are living there, which means that everybody who lives there pays the price in higher taxes, in higher costs for goods and services, and everybody who visits pays the price in higher hotels rates. This has knock-on effects that the people in the Biden administration and in the Biden White House never, ever think about. And it only underscores how much, and this is something we in Washington talk about a lot, how much everybody who lives in this Biden White House lives in this bubble of far left fever dreams in which what they think the American people want is actually only what a tiny proportion of PhDs from Columbia University want.
This is a very important point. It goes to something that's going to happen next week, right? Next week is the debate. And here's what people think is going to happen in the debate. Trump is going to have a temper tantrum. They're going to cut his mic off. Biden is going to look old. The moderators are going to ask about January 6th and about Trump and felons and Trump and felonies and this and whatever. And Gaza and Gaza and Gaza and Gaza. And Trump, to the extent that Trump can control the conversation, what is missing from this entire conversation is the fact that Trump is going to spend this debate talking about immigration. He'll mention the economy. He barely even has to mention the economy, to be honest, because the economy is a 35-point issue in his favor. And like every poll now shows that he's ahead of, I don't even understand how this election can go any but one way if that number doesn't improve. But not only does he have Biden doing what he did this week, there are 2 murders of young women by illegals who were lost by ICE after crossing the border. That's of course something that he used to his benefit in 2016 with the murder of the young woman in California by an illegal. Stuff could happen between now and next Thursday to reinforce and bolster that. And this issue is, aside from the economy, it's like number 2 or number 3. Gaza's number 1 for us. Gaza's number 1 for the media. Gaza's number 1 for a lot of people in the elites. The economy and immigration are the 2 leading issues in the United States. And
don't forget crime.
Yeah. Well, crime, right. Crime and immigration are, of course, intrinsically linked, as are, as you mentioned, immigration and the economy. Because if Trump were capable, and I don't know that he is, of making clear what you just said, which is immigration is contributing to inflation. You have immigrants chasing government goods and the government and all these policies in states that require them to be supported are having these knock-on effects. And you say that they live in a bubble, they live in a far left bubble in the Columbia, and I agree, but I assume a minimal level of political competence from an organization that's going to raise $1 billion, has all these outside consultants. Like, this is not what I do for a living, but I mean, I could tell them, like, don't do this. Wait till November 8th if you're going to do it. If you think that you're going to get help in Arizona and Nevada with these numbers, like Seth says, the blowback could have twice the effect as whatever positive consequences you think you're going to get from this. And I will just quickly read from the New York Times story, which tries to make this point. The latest policy could help Mr. Biden in battleground swing states like Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, where more than 100,000 voters in each of these states live in mixed status households, according to the American Business Immigration Coalition, which represents hundreds of companies and supports the proposed policy change. So first of all, this number comes from an advocacy group. So I'm not sure I would be so confident that it's 100,000 in Georgia and in Arizona and in Nevada. It's like, just add, sort of like maybe take what you're getting with a grain of salt. But I mean, that is what they're being told by the NGOs that speak to them. But I think where's the smell test? What's passing the smell test here?
I think a part of this is that Biden is in a uniquely perilous position in that if he moves to the center on any issue that is important to progressives or the far left, he loses he's great, he's sharp as a tack, he knows what he's doing defense. He can't really afford to lose the people who are already sort of, holding him up somewhat reluctantly or somewhat, nervously as is. I think, and he's put himself in this position. He's weak among his own, and he's not in a position to be able to sway, to influence them. He is going to be floating on whatever waves they put out and sort of taking his marching orders from the left because of that, because he is too weak in multiple senses of the word to do the common sense thing here, John, which would be to show a little spine, even pretend to show a little spine, just to get the larger percentage of the American voting public on his side.
I remain puzzled. Your analysis is correct, except that he's losing by double digits on all these issues. So they are, again, betting on the come that their ads about Trump being felonious and that Trump is a bad guy, and remember how you didn't like his craziness and you didn't like January 6th, are somehow going to outdistance these numbers in that YouGov poll that are just, let me just cite some of them right here. I have them right here. Okay, the economy. 61% say this issue is extremely important to them. 53-21 Trump. Threats to democracy in the US, 56%. Trump is now winning on threats to democracy, 38-29. Crime, 41-19. Immigration, 49-21. Gun control, Trump is ahead, because of course that's just guns, 32-26. Israel Gaza war 35-17, Russia Ukraine 37-24. Here's what Biden wins on. Abortion 36-25, racism 35-21, and climate change 35-18. Please note that in all of these numbers, he doesn't get over 35. It's not even that he's not, it's important to them, by the way, but it's not like you would think on abortion, since that's supposedly the issue that's going to be the accelerant that's going to win him everything, he'd be up more than 11 points, and that he would be up closer to 50. Trump is over 50 in the economy. He's at 41 on crime. He's at 49 in immigration. He's at 38 on threats to democracy. And he's at 35, 36 on these two major foreign policy issues. Biden is not going to win this election under these circumstances. So the circumstances have to change. So you're going left on these issues that the public is going right on?
But don't forget, I think it's important to underscore to people that the perception among the liberal elites who are the decision makers in the White House, who do the polling for the White House, who run the Democratic Party, the perception is that Biden has two problems. One is the problem you just laid out, right? Which is the center. Okay, where Biden needs to move toward the center in order to be able to win among independents, right? Because anyone who is going to win the election in November has to win with independents, not just with their base. But their other perception, which I think in large part is false, but which they believe with all their hearts, is that they have a problem on the far left, right? And this is what drives the Gaza hysteria. This is what drives the immigration missteps, I think, mistakes, crazy ass decisions, if you want to call it what it really is, because they are worried that all of those people in Michigan and in Minnesota, and they're very worried about Minnesota as well, they are concerned that those people aren't going to show up to vote for them. And so they've got to entice them in somehow. This is why they're becoming more and more extreme on Gaza. Because, after all, if you called Joe Biden Genocide Joe, the fact that he's going to be slightly sympathetic to Hamas is going to get you to show up and vote for him, I'm sure. But they're worried about those people. And so they're desperately trying to navigate, to triangulate between the center and the far left. And it makes them look schizo.
And it's also a part of problem with in terms they view as important issues, right? I mean, there's this, Pew does this monthly poll where they track what Republicans and Democrats consider a very big problem. And then they look at the partisan gap. And, the top one is inflation. Republicans, 80% say it's a very big problem. 46% of Democrats and lean Democrats say it's a big problem. So, which party is more likely to be in step with the American people in a gap that big? Obviously, the 80% of Republicans who say inflation is a very big problem are more likely to be on the side, where voters are. Here's the ability of Democrats and Republicans to work together. Democrats are more worried than Republicans about the ability of Democrats and Democrats and Republicans to work together. This is what I'm talking about. This is not, you to climate change. There's a huge partisan gap. Democrats, 58% say it's a very big issue. Republicans, 12%. Now, whatever you think of the importance of, climate change policy, where are the voters more likely to be found? Not on that issue, on the issue of inflation. There's a huge gap in Republicans caring about the federal budget deficit. There's a monster partisan gap in favor of Republicans on illegal immigration. And these are the ones that are, there's a 51-point partisan gap on illegal immigration. So it's in general, if you look at the issues that Democrats say are very big issues or very big problems, Biden has a party-wide problem where he's around, his environment is full of people who are saying things like, well, we better fix climate change and the racism. Here's a huge gap in favor of Democrats on racism and the affordability of health care. These are not important things, but they're not what the electorate is screaming about.
Right. Okay. So in 1995, 96, something like that, I can't remember the name of the operative in the Clinton White House, but there was an operative in the Clinton White House, and he went to some meeting of, Democratic interest groups and something, and he said, "Shut up. Okay? You guys just shut up. You're going to get what you want. We're the best you have. Don't talk about new family structures. Don't talk about, decriminalizing things. This is not going to help us win. We're the best hope you have. Shut up until after the election." Right? It's the last, genuinely successful, weirdly, as presidency so successful, you could say that he survived Lewinsky Gate the way that he survived Lewinsky Gate. Biden doesn't have the ability to tell these people to shut up. That's what we saw, as Danny says, as you say, about Michigan and Dearborn, Michigan, and the hysteria about Dearborn, Michigan. And that is not an accident. And that's why we want to talk about Danny's piece, one of the most important we published in a very long time, because Biden's unnerved response to the Gaza war is not spontaneous, and it did not come out of nowhere, and it is part of a larger process. Before we talk about that, let me talk to you about the book I've been recommending to you, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life, by our friend David Bahnsen, economist and financial manager, a book that makes the very important case that rather than treating work as a necessary evil that you have to do in order to get enough money to do the things that are more important to you, you need to view work as a pivotal component in the God-given dignity of every person and as a universal blessing that gives you meaning, that provides you with an ability to be to multiply your gifts for the sake of other people's. The fastest way to a failed society would be to continue in this low regard for work rather than celebrating our God-given capacity for productivity, this therapeutic, cathartic vehicle for dealing with challenging circumstances in life, and the backing for all of the other things in life, marriage, children, community worship, that we all crave, need, desire, and are best for the society as a whole. We only get those if we properly prioritize and centralize work. That's Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life by David Bahnsen. Check out more at fulltimebook.com or go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever fine books are sold to purchase it. So, Danielle Pletka, your article, The Anti-Semitism, Money, and Power Network and How to Smash It, now available for our subscribers and others who are scofflaws and need to start subscribing at commentary.org. Begins as follows: the mushrooming of anti-Semitic violence and activism on campuses across the United States is not an organic or spontaneous development. Money is flowing from the Arab world to universities, non-governmental organizations, and professional terrorist sympathizers across the country. That money is paying for organizing, educating, publicizing, and fanning the flames not simply of Israel bashing, but of eliminationist Jew hatred. It demands a major response. Congress has begun investigating. I note yesterday that some kind of a consent decree of some weird vintage was reached between the Biden Department of Education and the City University of New York and the University of Michigan, where it turns out that hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of complaints complaints about anti-Jewish activity on these campuses, reported to the diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and others, including campus police, went entirely uninvestigated. And this is before October 7th, that the general view and behavior at these schools is that violence against Jews or threats against Jews were simply not anything anybody needed to pay any attention to. And so they've now thanked the Department of Education for bringing to their attention this terrible problem that they themselves initiated. But I think this is the camel's nose under the tent of some of the things that you are talking about. There are counteractions now going on all over the place. Maybe 600 lawsuits are going to be filed against universities. But let's talk about how the problem began and accelerated, and the literally maybe decades. I think you date the spending, particularly of the nation of Qatar and its spending on campuses and other places, to almost 1984, I think, is the first number that you cite. But clearly since 2003, there's been an acceleration since you cite $2 billion in spending in the last, I think, 5 or 6 years, with $6 billion overall over those 40 years. Obviously, that spending has been accelerating.
So this is really something that we don't pay attention to. And the funny thing is, back in the 1980s, there was a flurry of stories about Arab spending at major U.S. universities. And this prompted Congress to actually pass an amendment to the Higher Education Act. It's called Section 117. That required universities to disclose donations from foreign countries of more than $250,000. Like many laws that exist, this one was observed in the breach. And at a certain moment during the Trump administration, there was an investigation by the Department of Education. The Secretary of Education, who was then Betsy DeVos, dives into the reporting that is being done and discovers that $6.7 billion in foreign funding between just 2014 and 2019, only that 5-year window, okay, $6.7 billion in foreign funding was not disclosed. 2.7 billion of that, so more than a third of it, came from Qatar. Okay. The next largest, for people who are like, I don't care about the Jews and their problems, whatever. I care about our real enemy, China. They were the next, $1.2 billion. And once you understand that this money is flowing in, then you also understand that there is a correlation, and there's lots and lots of really, I would say, solid empirical research about this. And this was ironically done before October 7th, that the more money that comes in from an Arab source into a university, and here again, we're mostly talking about Qatar, the more likely that university is to engage in, host, excuse, promote BDS, and allow anti-Semitism. The number, though, and again, too many numbers, fair enough, but the number is staggering. If you are getting money from an Arab country, you are 300% more likely to have rampant anti-Semitism on your campus. And so basically what I do in this piece is lay out the problem, which is you could go on for thousands of pages detailing the problem, detailing the incidents that nobody gives a damn about, that universities haven't dealt with, and then what to do about it. And the what to do about it is the enforcement of the rule of law and new laws.
So what you detail in the piece is this classic world of alphabet soup groups whose names you can't remember because their initials are not mellifluously joined together. So not just Students for Justice in Palestine, but now Professors for Justice in Palestine, which are connected to, Glipska and Gebevska and this group and that group, all of which have common staff, people moving from one place to the other, NGO funding from major, not just from Qatar, but major American foundations like the Tides Foundation and the Kaplan Foundation and others, and George Soros. And they, not only do they fund institutions and they help organize and they write handbooks to show you how to demonstrate and all of that, they have extraordinarily sinister connections, some of them almost direct, to terrorist groups. So you tell particularly the story of, again, my recall is crappy, but this group run by, why am I having this problem? I'm sorry.
You're talking about the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine?
Well, I am talking about
linked?
Samidun, the group
Yes.
Samidun. Okay. An organization run by someone named Charlotte Cates, but Charlotte Cates is not her married name.
Right.
Right.
So
her married name is Charlotte Cates Barakat. And her husband was a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, best known for staging the hijacking of the plane that was rescued at Entebbe in 1976. Oh, and the Munich massacre. But we can. So Samidun, what does Samidun do at Columbia?
So they're really, I lay this out in the piece, but they're a really interesting organization. So this really, I think, highlights in just one example what the problem is, not just with American universities where they entertain and support Samidun, but also with U.S. law. So, for example, okay, you can be a foreign terrorist organization, an affiliate of a foreign terrorist organization, and a member of a foreign terrorist organization, and still operate on U.S. campuses. Now, again, everybody has First Amendment rights in the United States, but universities lend themselves to entertaining groups like Samidun. So let's talk about who they are. They are designated by the Israeli government as a terrorist front. It is believed to be, Samidun is believed to be a subsidiary of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which you just described, and which is itself a U.S. designated terrorist organization. Samidun was founded by this guy, Khalid Barakat, in 2012. And if you look on campus, and again, we know Hamas, we know Hezbollah, we pay less attention to the PFLP. But if you look carefully on campuses, you'll see that people are carrying the PFLP flag, the PFLP logo. They are getting training from the lovely Mrs. Barakat, who you described, also known as Charlotte Cates, at GW University, which had one of the most, I would say second to Columbia, the most notorious and outrageous, blatantly anti-Semitic encampments in the nation's capital. Protesters conducted a teach-in around a book called The Strategy for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a manual published by, yes, you guessed it, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Columbia, Rutgers, Yale, Stanford, we could keep going on. But John, again, diving into this group is what's so interesting. They raise money. Okay, Samidun itself, which is designated by the Israelis as a terrorist organization. Big article in the Canadian press that lays out, and Khalid Barakat, the head of this, is based out of Canada. There's a big article in the Canadian press that lays out his ties to the PFLP directly. He has actually got a titular role inside the PFLP. They raise money in the United States through something, and this is again where everybody's like, oh my God, what are all these initials? Through something called the Alliance for Global Justice, which is a 501c3 registered with the Internal Revenue Service. They get money from far left groups that are that the ADL has kind of laid out. This group is so bad that they're not allowed to raise money through PayPal. They've been blacklisted by PayPal. They're banned in Germany. They are banned in these countries and registered as getting money from nonprofits in the United States, and they're registered as a nonprofit in Canada. This is the problem, okay? Because this is just one organization that very few people have heard of that is benefiting from U.S. tax law, that is being boosted by U.S. student groups, that is being boosted by Students for Justice in Palestine, that is being boosted by universities, and that is being hosted by universities with the money that we are all paying in tuition and supported by the money we're all paying in taxes. It's incredible.
Feels like reading
Yeah.
your piece, which is fantastic. It
Thank
felt
you.
a bit like whack-a-mole, because these organizations that you mentioned, they go away, they'll just be renamed something else, right? And the public is never going to even attempt to keep track of whether it's called Sami Dune or this or that, or Students for Justice in Palestine, or Students for Palestinian Justice, or like it's just so what do we how do we handle the whack-a-mole part of this, which is that there are always these sort of subsidiaries and junior partners that the larger organizations, the PFLP and others, will just make disappear and start another affiliate or something like that. How do you hit all the moles, I guess, is the question.
My husband just set off our burglar alarm, so that sound is that. So,
Fortunately, we don't hear it. This
oh,
is how
excellent.
good your mic is.
I know. Well,
Congratulations.
thank the American Enterprise Institute. It's only our 85th different mic, but I'm glad it's working well. So, I mean, you ask exactly the right question, right? Which is, all right, so for example, a lot of us who pay attention to this have heard of the Holy Land Foundation, right? They got shut down during the Bush administration at the height of sort of post 9/11 anger in the United States about supporting terrorist organizations in the United States. Holy Land was basically a subsidiary of Hamas. They got shut down. 5 of their staff got sent to prison, but they had a bigger staff than that. The remaining staff went on to start another organization, one which was called Kind Hearts. They were then shut down by the federal government. And so they all went, as you rightly say, and they started another organization. Everybody will be interested to know, by the way, they came together to run an organization called American Muslims for Palestine, which is the parent organization of, you guessed it, Students for Justice in Palestine. Now, so what do you do, right? Okay, let's say we shut down American Muslims for Palestine. They just go off and call themselves, American Patriots for Palestine or something else. And the answer is 2 things, the law and fear. Okay. One of the reasons that you see that DEI and all of the wokeness in American politics has been so impactful is because people are afraid to transgress. Okay? People are not afraid to transgress when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to the only unprotected minority in the United States of America, Jewish people. Right? And so there needs to be an environment in which people actually ask themselves fearfully, right? Can we let them on campus? Might we be in an environment where somebody will accuse us of material support for terrorism, which is a federal crime? Might we be in a situation where students will sue us and win in federal court and get tens or hundreds of millions of dollars from us, our precious money that we use to pay our senior administrators? So these are the kinds of things that are necessary. And what we have to do is change the law, first of all, so that Holy Land cannot simply rename itself as American Muslims for Palestine. Second of all, so that so that these organizations cannot benefit from other organizations' 501c3 status. So everybody knows 501c3 is just a provision of U.S. tax law. What it does is it means that donations to that organization are tax deductible, but it comes with obligations. Commentary is a 501c3. American Enterprise Institute is a 501c3, and we all file what's called a Form 990. And the Form 990 is a pretty intrusive, demanding form. But you can actually be a 501c3 and have all the rights and privileges without doing that from a larger organization that can grant you those rights That shouldn't be allowed. That's how Students for Justice in Palestine and American Muslims for Palestine is operating. So all of these things need to be shut down. Loopholes need to be shut down. And we need to instill an environment of fear and trepidation about transgressing. That's what Congress is up to now. That's what all the laws that I lay out in the piece need to do.
This is why the piece is so exciting, by the way, because, you know, I published something 6 months ago called "They're Coming After Us," which laid out the nature of the assault on American Jews. But of course, one of the things that people said to me after I wrote it is, what do we do? What do we do about this? And that's when you and I started talking about this piece, I said, I think we need to lay out an action plan for what to do. We saw one private action plan come up spontaneously, which was major donors to major universities announcing that they were going to suspend or cancel their gifts to these schools that were doing nothing to protect their co-religionists and Jews in general from the kind of assaults and threats and discomforts and unpleasantnesses that had become daily, become their daily bread. And so that happened spontaneously. What you're talking about has to be systematic, deliberate. It's going to take a long time. It takes a long time to steer the ship of state, to get legislation through, to deal with the inevitable and understandable constitutional issues that are raised by the question of whether you can intercede in organizations that claim only to be speaking and not to be acting, right? So speech is an almost unlimited protection. Action is not. Action must obey. I mean, I guess in speech, you're not allowed to yell. Maybe you are. It depends on the circumstance. Shout fire in a crowded theater. But you are allowed, but you are not allowed to set fire to the theater. So action and speech are two separate things. And if you can start penalizing action, and even more important, penalizing the organizations that seem to turn a blind eye toward action, which is what this very early thing that I talked about at the beginning, the Department of Education citing or yelling at CUNY and the University of Michigan for refusing to investigate charges of anti-Semitic threats. That starts something, but Congress has to act. There has to be a presidency that's willing to sort of accept, sign into law things that are happening. And there are real things that can be done, like actual policies of the sort that, Danny, you lay out, that the Brandeis Center is doing in terms of suing individual universities on the grounds that their behavior toward Jewish students violates the Title VI protections of Jews under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that raises an interesting thing, because you bring this up. There was this controversy fight on the right about the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, the International Human Rights Agenda as a definition of anti-Semitism. People on the right saying that this will represent a limitation in speech rights and all of that. But as you say in the piece, without a codified definition of anti-Semitism, that can create the boundaries around which the fear that Dan, you say, that you can say, well, if you cross this line, we all have this as 501c3s, by the way. We know where the lines are. I run one, you're involved in one. I can tell you what my 10 lines are that could get my status removed, commentary status removed as an organization you can donate to. I can't endorse candidates. I can't talk explicitly about political parties. Those are sort of the two major. I can't say that, this commentary supports X party's interest or we want Y candidate to win for office. Those are violations of the rules of 501c3. And the IRS has the right, almost unlimited, to say, sorry, you're done. You don't even have a right really to appeal. Put this in, and you could have hundreds and hundreds of organizations that can be approached by litigators to say, hey, fine, you want to talk. You're not going to, no one can give you a cent that can be donated from that could be written off on their taxes, or you're violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's actually, you're not allowed to do that. You're going to lose federal funding. And when we talk about losing federal funding for universities, we're talking about billions and billions and untold billions of dollars in research grants and, things that pass through.
One of the challenges with all this, I think, is that some huge political donors whose money is sort of commingled with the money that comes in from these groups and from foreign sources, commingled to help create these campus productions. Those are also that money, the money that comes from those donors. Those donors are also deeply involved with all sorts of politicians, and backing them. So there's a very uneasy financial alliance here between protests and pretty standard Democratic donor machines. And that creates a big problem, I think.
So where we are here, first of all, I do want to mention, because I neglected to at the beginning, Danny has a Substack. She shares with our friend Mark Thiessen, also at AI, called "What the Hell Is Going On." Go to her Substack, get the wisdom you're getting today on a very regular basis. I'm not going to say how often you're on Substack, because you get to pick and choose that yourself, but get the wisdom that you should from "What the Hell Is Going On" by Danielle Pletka, Mark Thiessen. It's exciting because we have plans of action here, and some of them are my good friends at the law firm of Kasowitz Benson have filed lawsuits at Columbia and Harvard and other places. As I said, the Brandeis Center under the leadership of Kenneth Marcus is doing the same. There are literally 600 universities that are at risk of having to respond to Title VI claims against them on the part of Jewish students. And I think, Abe, you mentioned the donor class and its relations and its intimacy with larger parts of the Democratic coalition. But the fear and trepidation not only has to be on the part of governments and breaking laws and all of that, but this is something I've been saying to groups now for months, and it's a slightly discomforting thing to say in public because it's the sort of thing you say in private. But Jews have been, have been prospering and succeeding in America as they succeeded nowhere else in the course of history for 100 years now, and have done disproportionately well, have enjoyed the benefits and bounties of the society, are well-to-do, have husbanded a lot of resources, have a lot of money to spend. And the general Jewish predilection has been to say, just leave us alone. We're building hospitals, we're building libraries, we're building museums, we give a lot to the arts, we care about Israel, but what we really want is for you to leave us alone. We're going to be as good citizens as we possibly can, and you leave us alone. And that's been the 100-year implicit policy of the Jewish community, and it has to end now, because Jews need to harness their power to protect American Jewry from this unprecedented assault on our very ability to be Jews in public, on campuses, wearing kippot, putting up posters where we want to put up posters, all of that. And it's very uncomfortable, because what people want to do is say, love me, like me, be kind to me, be gracious to me, let me put a plaque, give me a plaque. And you now have to say, as some of the more aggressive donors have said, fear me. We're a small part of the population, but we are a large part of the giving community in the United States, wildly out of proportion to our numbers. And I mean giving. I mean not only political giving, but charitable giving. And you want to be a hospital, you want to be Cornell Weill Hospital and host, Doctors for the Liberation of Palestine. Good. You know what? Next fundraiser, nobody shows. You want to do that at Mount Sinai? Nobody shows. You want to do that at Penn? Nobody shows. That though the checkbook is closed until you take action, and that's part of what. That's not really a major issue in Danny's piece, but Danny's piece is about what the law can do, and what I think social sanction. We need to introduce a powerful social sanction that somehow we didn't know had been removed from anti-Semitism. Not really, not until the last year. We didn't feel it. I didn't feel it. I don't know if yes, there were shootings at synagogues. Terrible things are happening. You have to organize. There have been these moments, canaries in the coal mine for what could have been the future bad result of anti-Semitism, but the future is now. And so
Danny makes a really important point in the piece where she mentions the fact that the phrase visibly Jewish, the fact that the phrase visibly Jewish you mentioned has come into popular use is kind of a subject all its own.
Yeah. All right. So listen, it's time for Commentary Recommends, and I'm going to recommend Danielle Pletka and Mark Thiessen Substack. What the hell is going on? That's the takeaway from the day, aside from you going to commentary.org and reading Danny's remarkable piece, The Anti-Semitism, Money, and Power Network, and How to Smash It, in our July-August issue, which I haven't really introduced to people. So I'm going to spend 2 seconds talking about what is in this issue, because it's kind of amazing. We have the first appearance of Ayaan Hirsi Ali in commentary, with a remarkable peroration about the world of the NGO foreign policy moderates called Mr. Consensus, Portrait of a Suicidal Worldview. We have Arthur Herman on China and Artificial Intelligence, the Cold War We're Not Fighting. The hedge fund manager, Cliff Asness, has a piece called Capitalism is the Real Target, in which he suggests that it is the culture of success that is the real accelerant, anti-accelerant to the causes of what is going on campus, that Israel's small bore success and American capitalism's large bore success has created this revolt against it on campuses, and that is one of the things that we need to fight against. Andy Ferguson on Glenn Lowry's book, Late Admissions. Pretty remarkable debut essay by Irina Velitskaya called The Diaspora Tragedy of Philip Roth, which is about reading American pastoral in the wake of October 7th. Joseph Epstein on Doris Kearns and Richard Goodwin, a piece called The 1960s Were Not So Goodwin. And Gary Saul Morson of Northwestern, one of the few heroes at Northwestern, on Alexander Solzhenitsyn's arrival in the United States and his prophetic warnings about the diseases to American culture that have sprung up as we see them in the wake of October 7th, the materialist frenzy and the refusal to connect to larger matters, including divine matters. So we're very proud of this issue. And of course, our full complement of columnists. We have Jim Meggs on Anthony Fauci. We have Matt Continetti's piece, which is called Who Will Speak for America. Christine Rosen on the war on Samuel Alito, and another, heart-wrenching tearjerker from Mayor Soloveichik, our Jewish commentary columnist. So please, by all means, come, subscribe, read us, read Danny's piece, read the rest of the issue, join us. Thank you so much, Danielle Pletka. It's been a pleasure editing you for the first time in 36 years, and it's going to be, I'm sure, much sooner than that for us to collaborate again. And for Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.